Okay, so the equipment that we're going to need, I have placed out here on the table. This is an inline suction catheter kit. We call it a Ballard, but that's kind of like calling tissues Kleenex, or Q-tips, swabs, that type of thing. So the company is actually not the Ballard company. If you see there, it's Haylard. But this is called with Ballard Technology. So they're taking the Ballard company's information and technology and giving them credits. So this is specific for a tracheostomy. This is the diameter. It's a 14 French. So when you are using a size 8 disposable intercannula, or even a size 6, you could use the size 14 French suction catheter. The difference is the diameter of the tube that goes down inside. Now, there is a calculation that you can do to decide what's the biggest suction catheter I could use in this airway in order to safely suction a patient without making them hypoxic. But for the purposes of our facility, we keep it across the board. Everybody uses a 14 because you can do it with a 6 or you could do it with an 8. And as you saw earlier, we only have 6s, 7s, and 8s. So Jack has a disposable intercannula trach because if you look here on the front of his flange, he has a size 8 disposable cannula trach. Okay, now his Ballard I changed yesterday, but for the purposes of this video, we're going to give him a new Ballard now anyway. Okay, now another piece of the trach system that you may not be familiar with, that I do give a lot of explanation, is this part right here. So this is the heat and moisture exchanger. It's abbreviated HME. So the way that this works is this is actually not a filter. It is a catch. So the circuit is connected to the ventilator over here. It comes through a biofilter, which makes sure that he's getting clean air. Goes through the circuit and then gives him a breath. That breath inside of his lungs will get heated and humidified by his lungs and then exhaled out through the circuit. And then this is actually the exhalation port right here. Okay, it's called a whisper valve. It kind of whispers a little bit and it swivels, okay, so that the circuit can move. And the exhalation air comes out here. So when he exhales out here, it's going through this catch, and the catch is catching the heat and catching the humidity from the previous breath. And then in turn, when the next breath comes up through the circuit up into the HME, it's heated and humidified by the catch, and the HME is delivering the breath to Jack at humidity that is 100%, is always the goal, and body temperature is also always the goal. So it's basically an artificial nose and mouth. When we breathe, that is always the goal. Now, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but one of the side effects of Jack being able to talk and having his cuff and pilot balloon always deflated, as you see here, it's deflated. So if the pilot balloon is deflated, you know the cuff is deflated, right? So that is always there. So what's happening is he breathes out through his mouth and his nose, and he doesn't breathe through this HME very much. So Jack does tend to get a little dried out. He gets dried mucus plugs and boogers, if you want to call it that, stuck inside of his lungs and inside of his airway that we have to suction and lavage in order to get out. So that's what the HME is supposed to prevent. But because Jack talks to me, right? And sometimes he talks so much that he makes the ventilator alarm. Because he talks to us all so much, we have to leave him deflated because freedom of speech is actually one of the most favorite parts of being switched to a trach off of ET tube. So that being said, we're going to go back over to our table where I have all the equipment set up for the trach care. Now these are drain sponges, and they are split drain sponges. So I'm going to open one of these real quick with one hand. Oh, I'm going to do this. Okay, here we go. Sorry. Okay. It's hard to have the phone in one hand and try to do everything I got to do with the other hand. Okay, so there we go. Now this is the split gauze. I like to think of it like a pair of pants. Okay, so it goes up underneath the flange this way. It has that little slit in the middle that goes around the trach. Now we use one to clean with and one to replace the dirty. So what we clean with is saline bullets. Now a saline bullet is the basic delivery device for easy access to saline. Now we could use this as eye drops. We could use this as cleaning solution for the trachs. Now when you go and you get stitches at the emergency room, what do they tell you? They tell you keep the stitches clean and dry, and don't wash that with peroxide. You don't wash it with anything other than maybe a little bit of antibiotic ointment if they say so. But ordinarily, it's keep it clean and dry. So when we're caring for a stoma, we have the same philosophy. So I'm just using saline. I'm going to use that to wash the area, but I don't want it to get too saturated. Although he can take a shower, we dry it afterwards. Okay, so but we want to definitely keep it clean. Now this drain sponge is going to replace the dirty one that's currently on his neck. Now some other equipment that I have here set up is a N-Tidal CO2 detector. And this is the sampling line. So this sampling line goes into the top of this little machine right here. Okay, so this little machine shows us the saturation, the beats per minute of the heart, respirations per minute, and the N-Tidal CO2. So N-Tidal CO2 is the measurement of whether or not a person is ventilating. Okay, the ventilator is not just assisting with oxygenation, because if oxygenation was the only issue, then we would just have them on a nasal cannula, an oxygen mask, something like that, in order to deliver oxygen. Jack's problem is actually that he cannot ventilate. So ventilating is not breathing. Ventilating is the removing of carbon dioxide from your system. So what happens is this tube attaches to the airway, and it's going to take a little bit of his exhaled breath and analyze it inside this machine and let me know if he's properly ventilating. If he's not, then we're going to have to change the settings on the ventilator. You don't intubate somebody or put them on a trach if they're just having oxygen issues. Oxygen issues you would fix with oxygen. Ventilation issues you fix with a ventilator. So we do not have to always provide oxygen when a person is on a ventilator. Not everybody who's on a ventilator requires oxygen. So I'm going to just put this over here on Jack's lap, and we're going to start moving our equipment over to be used and actually do his trach care. Now, this is the probe that measures whether or not Jack is oxygenating. So we need to know that as well, right? So how does this little magic light inside of there, can we see it? Okay, wait. Let's see. See if we can get you to see it. All right, see the little red light in there? Yes, you do, because I do. Okay. So how does that little red light tell me whether or not there's oxygen inside of Jack's fingertip? Well, you're not here to answer, so I'm going to have to just explain it without torturing you, but I ordinarily would try to make you all guess how it works. Okay, so what happens when, let me get gloves on. What happens when oxygen comes into the body? How does it get around the body into the proper spots where it needs to be? Well, it hops on top of a red blood cell. How does it attach to a red blood cell? With an iron bond, right? So if there is oxygen attached to the red blood cell, that iron bond would reflect the light that is coming through his finger. So the measurement tool in here is deducting from 100%. Okay, so if all of the light goes and bounces back off of him, that means all of his oxygen is on the hemoglobin. If it's not and it's going through, it's going to deduct the amount that comes through and then give us a reduced number. So he's on currently set 95, because that means that 95% of the light is being reflected off of the oxygen and then coming back to the sensor. So that's what this number is telling me. But it's not going to be the same all the time. It depends on the breath and how often he's getting the oxygen. So here, he's up to 99 because his volume was probably up on that previous breath. See, the 525 is his tidal volume. That means in the previous breath, he took enough oxygen to bring his oxygen saturation up to 99. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video because his nurse Lillian is here and has some questions for him. And we will resume after she is done.